Alright guys, Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons, and what I've got for you here is how to improvise like Dave Murray from Iron Maiden. Alright, so I've done quite a lot of tutorials on Dave Murray and his style before, and I will link to them all with the eye up there and also in the pinned comment below. So I'd suggest familiarising yourself with those first. If you're not familiar with it, what I'll do is kind of condense those down into as small amount of time as possible as I can. We'll run through these ideas and then we'll look at how you can kind of piece them together to create a sort of Dave Murray style solo on the fly. Just before we crack into it, in terms of the tone, I probably have far too much gain on just now. I'll put my hands up and say that, but it's just to make playing a bit easier on my end here. But if you do like some sort of into some sort of Marshall head and Marshall cab maybe, with maybe like a drive pedal or boost at the front, if you use your neck pick up a lot, you get that kind of creamy tone. If you want a more authentic Dave Murray thing, put on loads of reverb, well, a bit of reverb and loads of delay, really, that's the trick. Tiny bit of chorus or detuning. I've not got too much delay on just now, or reverb just to make things easier to hear for you. But if you want is to mimic his tone or get kind of in the ballpark, that's something you really want to look into. So the first thing to talk about is, I suppose, the scales he tends to use. So we have something like Aeolian. They use that quite a bit. Phrygian. And of course the blues scale. And pentatonic, I suppose. I'm going to do all these examples in the key of E minor, and rather than having tabs, because this is more about improvising in the style of, the idea is that you take the kind of rough bare bones of the licks and you just make them your own. So what he does a lot is something called trilling, which is basically going between the two notes in rapid succession. Now when you're doing this, you don't really want to be thinking too much about hammering on really hard or pulling off really rigidly. You just kind of want to get a nice fluid movement between your fingers without tensing up too much, which isn't the easiest thing to do because the finger behind is going to be anchored down while one above trills. Now he tends to just do this over relatively small intervals, so maybe like a semitone, a tone, or three tones a minor third. He will sometimes trill over a major third, but it's fairly unlikely, fairly uncommon in his playing. So even if we take those two concepts, let's take the Aeolian mode and let's take trilling, and let's just trill down the scale. We're already getting something in the kind of Dave Murray ballpark. Right, the next thing is what I've called before the embellished trill. So if you're familiar with the channel and you know the video I'm referencing, then shout out to Lick Squad Elite, because you guys rock. But right, it's basically doing a trill like a hammer-on pull-off, right, on one string, then hitting a note on an adjacent string. So you could trill first, then hit the lower note, or you could hit the lower note first and then trill. You can kind of sweep down through these if you do that. So say I'm going down on the G string, down on the B, hammer on, pull off, and you can really start to rip through them and get some speed. And this is something that I have covered in much more detail in the aforementioned videos, so if this is coming at you too fast, please go and check them out. But instead of just using pentatonic shapes, you'll also use stuff like this one, or here, or something that I just only kind of found out recently when I was looking at his Afraid to Shoot Strangers solo, using the blues note, so this kind of little semitone trill, and semitone embellished trill. Also switching between this tone here, this tone trill, and this minor third trill. And something that I've sort of started to get into here is varying it. So instead of just trilling or embellished trilling in a set way, he'll start to double things up. And it goes the same for his normal trilling. It's really unusual to hear a Dave Murray solo that's in, say we just do a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So without me speaking, he doesn't really do stuff like that, he varies it up more. So you'd have something like, you know, a bit more randomized, a bit more kind of loose, a bit on the fly feeling. Another thing he really likes to do is trem picking, just kind of going up the scale. So trem picking, just picking really fast on a string. That's another thing he likes to do, as well as going up the scale, just picking kind of 3 notes and coming down them. Specifically that shape actually, so you're down a semitone to a tone. Picking the first note for longer. And what he'll often do is combine this trem picking with the open string stuff. So say we're in E minor, which is what we're based in here, we can use the open E string to great effect. You can just kind of go up the scale and we'll trem pick the E string. So I'll slow that down a bit, I'm just going to go in. And if you know your scales or your modes, you'll recognise that was just an E natural minor. Just going up on the E string. Another way he'll use this is skipping notes, so kind of going here. So for reference there, that lick I'm going from the 19th fret open, 17 open, 15 open, 14 open, and just using that same idea going down, 15 open, 12 open, 14 open, 10 open. And you could just go fretted note then open string, so... or you could trem pick it. And what they'll also do here, rather than picking everything, is use a little legato. So say for example we could pick the 15th fret on the E string, pull off to the 12, and then pull off to the open. And he gets a ferocious amount of speed on this, so you get this real... Other places he might do that in this key would be the same frets, 15 to 12, on the B string. Or up here at the, what would be the 18th and the 15th frets on the B. You know, same frets on the E string as well, 15 and 18. So he occasionally does sweeping. I think it's the Fear of the Dark solo where he does a little minor arpeggio, so if we're in E, or the little break like that. So that first one was 9, 10, 8, 12, going from the G, B to the E strings, right? Just all down picking that. Another one you might do a little bit is this kind of rake, so you got 14, 13, 12, again G through to B, E. Or that same shape up here, so you'd have 16, 15, 14. But he's more likely to kind of use that to rake in into a note now than the kind of Malmsteen, you know. He also does a bit of tapping. This isn't an area of his playing I've dived into too much, so if you want me to do that, do hit me up in the comments. The other thing which I haven't looked at much at all is his bar work. Now, I've currently got this blocked off with a tremolo or tremolo, I always forget what it's called, in the back here, so I'm not going to be doing any of the diving stuff. Again, if that's a topic you would like me to look at, then do let me know. So to start to use all of this, we want to think about how he actually applies it to the fretboard, how he links all these ideas together, and I think that's really useful is to think about your shapes. So if you learn Dave Murray solos and watch him improvise, you'll find out there's certain ways he likes to navigate the fretboard. So something he really likes to do, if he's playing in the E minor pentatonic here, right, he like to slide up there, so using the 14th fret to the 16th on the G, hammer on 15 to 17 on the B, 15 on the E, and then either hammering or picking the 17th fret and doing a bend. So you could be doing your, let's do the embellished shrill stuff. And you can kind of rush that and play it in kind of loose time, so it's got that more kind of, again, jumped up bluesy vibe. If we want to traverse more of the fretboard, some things he really likes to do is to go down on the G string, so even starting up at the 16th and the 14th frets here, and just going down. So you'd have something like going from the low to the high, you'd have like 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12, 14, 16, and just trill randomly down that, right? Resolving to that note really sounds like him. And since I've stumbled onto this, again, this is something that I've covered in the aforementioned lessons, but this little move, very Dave Murray. So hammer on, pull off by a tone, and slide down by a semitone, and that's exactly how I ended that last example there as well. So let's expand this, let's think about that E minor pentatonic box shape and kind of going up to here, and then coming down that G string pattern we had. So let's have... So rather than going down all the way in the G string, he will use other strings to change as well. Now there are a whole ton of shapes he uses, so this is where exploring his solos and learning them and looking at the licks, and particularly watching him play live is hugely beneficial. But say you've worked your way down to here, you'll often kind of go across to the B string using those notes, and that's something that's worthwhile mentioning. When he crosses strings, he likes to use trills because it makes picking an awful lot easier. He's much more of a legato man than a strict picker. So say we've worked our way down to here, and we want to go back up. So all I'm doing is using the scale shapes, you know, across different strings, thinking about these little paths that he uses and trying to get from A to B. Last but by no means least is the kind of bluesy, bendy licks that he does. So again, this is where your pentatonic and your blues scales will come in incredibly useful. All the kind of classic stuff, you know, those kind of ones. That. All these cliched blues licks, but just play them on the neck pickup, fair bit of gain, sped up, and you start to get the Dave Murray ballpark. Particularly if you pick one bluesy lick, play it kind of slowly and then kind of speed it up. You stay in time, but let's take yeah, so that's it. You do like a slow lick, build some speed on it, you kind of lock it in, then you build that speed, do some bends to release the tension, because that's what his playing is all about. It's about building up the speed, building up this frustration, and then he lets out with that, you know, just a really satisfying bend. Okay, so to recap everything we've looked at, we've got trills, embellished trill, using legato, the type of scales he uses, the different shapes he likes, that he uses short stretches, trem picking, using the open strings for trem picking, and kind of legato with the open strings, tapping, sweeping, and bar work. I've glossed past, I do apologise. How to get from kind of A to B, using trills and stuff like that to hop over the strings. So let's chuck all of this in a blender, I'll improvise some stuff, and as I'm doing it, I'll talk about kind of what's going on in my head. So, classic, let's start off with some bends. Double stop, maybe a bit of a blues. Let's get a line and speed it up. Let's vary it more. Bends to release the tension there, so starting off kind of bendy, going a wee bit bluesy, building the speed on something, varying it to make it more exciting, then releasing all that built up tension with the bends. Right, let's do one that's more trill based this time, so let's start off low. In fact, let's use the open G string. So there, bit of open G string, bit of trilling up, more of a kind of major triumphant sound, so maybe like something off the Seventh Son, you know, more the kind of upbeat solos on that one. Trem picking, and let's combine some open strings with some trilling. And I'm going to try and chuck all these things together now, so I'm going to start with some bends, I'll go into some bluesy stuff, then I'll do some trilling, do some trem picking. I'll try and keep it nice and condensed as well. Start with a nice double stop. Iron Maiden and Dave Murray playlist is there, or click that for some more how to sound like stuff. But yeah, hit subscribe to keep up to date with the channel, leave me any suggestions, check out the tabs on Patreon, and enable all notifications by ringing that little bell on the side, if you feel so inclined. Cheers guys.